Hey, Rich Tyson here. I took a few extra days before putting this little update on the last school board meeting, which took place last Tuesday. It's currently Monday the 19th. I'm almost a week later on this, and I normally try to get these things turned around pretty quickly, but I had to do a little investigation of my own. I had some conversations with some folks and just really kind of try to take a step back and look at this from a 20,000 foot view as opposed to being kind of right in the weeds where I've been on this. You know, so I had put up a video talking about how they changed the rules ahead of this previous school board meeting for how people can speak to the board and the new time constraints and the limited participation availability in that they're only allowing for 10 people to speak. And I assumed this was kind of a reaction to what took place the previous month between myself and the now thankfully former school board member. And I assumed that that's why they made the rules changes. And I'll be honest with you, I was totally wrong. And I've figured that out over the last couple of days here. And I want to bring this to your attention because I think it's extremely important. So first, what I'm going to do is I want to touch back to my comments that I made publicly that night. And then I'll catch you on the other side of that, and we'll continue on with the dialogue.
Next up is Mr. Rich Tyson. Mr. Tyson,
Sure,
please
you
state your name and address.
Microphone tonight. You don't even have to move the microphone tonight. So I don't like to read written statements. I prefer to just have a dialogue, but trying to stay to 3 minutes, so I'm going to be respectful of that time frame. So I trust that going forward, we're never going to see such clear signs of disrespect from board members towards those of us who also volunteer to come and participate in this process as we did last month. We who volunteer our time to come speak are often the actual parents of the students within the district that you control. Secondly, what started the blatant signs of disrespect last month from certain board members was a parent's concern that a certain board member, unnamed per your rules, may have potential ties to Passstone. It was asking why Penfield had not dropped its relationship, as did Fairport and Pittsford. Since then, Penfield has dropped its relationship with Passstone, according to Dr. Putnam's email, and an existing board member has taken on the role of Director of Development with the organization, according to an update on LinkedIn a few weeks ago. Call me conspiratorial, but what it looks like is that the father was absolutely correct in the possible conflict of interest that he had. Penfield reacted by quickly dropping Passstone, and that board member was able to come forward and acknowledge that they had in fact taken on the role within that organization. So what happens next? Without any communication with the community, you opted to change the procedures for how people can come and speak to this body, as I'm doing this evening. Your response to parents asking for more dialogue and transparency is to shorten the amount of time that we have before this body to present our thoughts and to cap the time period overall each month, limiting the number of potential speakers. Are you concerned that we're going to expose more potential conflicts of interest? Do you fear community oversight of this board and this body? It appears that what we have is a board and an administration that is adversarial to the very people that have students that are involved in this education system that you're controlling. For that, I hereby request that my child's classroom next year have a video camera in it that's recording all that's being taught each day so that I can review with her. You have lost my confidence as a parent, and you have the best interest of my child in mind. It is your own lack of transparency and your refusal for dialogue that has created this situation. To be very clear, this has nothing to do with a concern over the teachers in this district. Many of us feel that they are also at the mercy of this board, administration, and New York State guidance. Continuing on the topic of transparency, when are we going to be able to see the results of the equity audit that was conducted months ago at this point? My wife and I participated, and there has been literally no follow-up with any of us that did, advising as to what the results were. Why are we hiding them? Why are they not public yet? Lastly, for those of you who claim that we were just a bunch of parents upset over your obsession with DEI and the like, you have caused the problem. Many parents I meet with feel that they were literally lied to by the administration when they approach them with concerns. Your continued refusal to engage in meaningful dialogue with the community leads us to wonder what you're hiding and creates confusion about what your goals truly are. You, again, are creating these problems. We're starting to fight back against a system that we're forced to pay for, whether it works for our students or contradicts lessons that we are teaching at home. We will not stand idly by without a fight for our children and the education that they receive. You have the power to fix this by hearing what we say and responding in a way that demonstrates that you want us at the table. Your failure to do so will only result in more frustrated parents showing up here every month to be heard, and the biggest push you've ever seen in Penfield over the next 2 election cycles to make sure that there's a new majority on this board. And I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Tyson.
So as you can see, I tried to take them to task for the lack of transparency, the refusal for dialogue, and changing the name of the game. Again, if I was wiser then, I would have had a very different set of comments for them that evening, but I was going under what my gut instinct was at the time. And I think I was wrong, and I'm going to explain why. So the school board meeting where things kind of blew up, last month in June, there was a bunch of folks there asking about this potential DEI superintendent hire that Penfield was acknowledging that they were likely to make. We assumed that wasn't taking place that evening because the agenda did not reflect that was going to be voted on. Now, we obviously learned after the fact that it was there. They just buried it because they didn't, I don't know, not that we could stop them from doing it, but for some reason they didn't want to acknowledge it that night that they were in fact going to be voting to approve of this hire. So within, I think, like 24, 48 hours after they made that vote, Penfield Central School District on their own Facebook page posted the acknowledgement that they had hired Tasha Potter to be the new DEI superintendent, and immediately started hiding or blocking any non-positive comment, whether it was a question asked or a flat out, this is garbage. They were blocking it actively. I mean, I know because I posted 5 comments myself and jokingly said like, oh, here's the 4th comment. Is this one going to disappear too? And of course it did. So if you look back at their Facebook page, you will see that there is pretty much only glowing endorsements on it, right? Then they changed the rules ahead of the next board meeting, July, when guess who's going to be there to share what her new strategy is and ambitions and how she envisions taking on this role. The DEI superintendent. So we went there, and I was shocked. There was a lot of people there that I've never seen at a school board meeting. Not so surprisingly, they were all wearing their matching Black Lives Matter shirts. They had the majority of the floor that night. Out of the 10 people that were able to speak, I think they allowed for 11, if I remember the tape correctly, but I could go back. The link to the full board meeting will be in the description below. But they had the overwhelming number of people that were signed up. I know other parents like myself that wanted to sign up, that the form was showing up that it was unable because they had obviously maxed out the number of participants that they were going to now allow for going forward. So here's my take on it. This is not a public school. This is a government school. The people that run it are government employees. The board are elected government officials. They are actively, purposefully silencing us, blocking us, refusing dialogue with us, and then they wonder why that there's frustration in the community. Obviously, it's because people are getting pissed that they're not being heard. There's a lot of confusion around what this new curriculum is supposed to look like, what it's supposed to accomplish, whether we need it or not. And the other thing is the thing that was supposedly, as I understand it, informing whether or not we needed a DEI superintendent was the equity audit that took place a number of months ago. My wife and I participated in it. She was pretty much the only minority on the call other than the black woman who was hosting the dialogue, and there were 2 other black parents. But by all accounts, from what I remember and what she remembers, she was the only other minority. Now, she got a lot of nasty looks and reactions out of the white women on that call that didn't want to hear how a minority wants her kid to just treat everybody with respect. Apparently, she's supposed to toe the line that her child should be treated differently or treat others differently based on race, which we all know is absolute garbage. But, that's what's taking place right now. They don't make the equity audit results known. My guess is because what they found is that a majority of minorities are probably pretty happy in Penfield. At least the ones I talked to are. I'm sure we could find 1 or 2 that are not. They were probably in that group that was there to speak out about how we needed a DEI superintendent. But these are government schools, government officials, government employees that are actively silencing parents and community members, blocking our ability to comment, making it difficult for us to show up and speak to the board. They say that they opened up transparency and dialogue by hosting three whole town halls, one that takes place before school starts, one that's halfway through the year, and one almost towards the end of the year. So, they have a board meeting every month, but we can only somehow squeak out 3 town halls across 180 school days. So just beware. That's what's taking place. Penfield School District is actively silencing and blocking and not being transparent. And my question is this: if they think that this is such a good idea, if the community was asking for it in the equity audits, if the community says that they need it, if the community is supportive of it, why are they not opening up for dialogue and allowing us to be heard on this and to ask questions? They claim that we just hate DEI. But the reality of it is half of us don't even know what the hell they're trying to do because you can't get anybody to answer your question. Dr. Putnam, I'll give him this, he should be in sales because you can sit down with him and he will make you feel like you're the most important person on earth and that he's got your back and he's, everything you'd ever want him to be. And then he turns around and the actions that come out of the administration are 180 degrees from that. So beware. At least Penfield, I wouldn't be surprised if other school districts are doing it, are hiding our ability. They're blocking us. They do not want to hear from us. They only want to hear from the people in the community that are going to give them a resounding round of applause and say thank you so much for doing what you're doing. So I'm going to leave this video off with Tasha Potter's presentation from the board meeting, explaining, I guess minimally, what her objective is going to be and what she thinks that this is going to look like going forward, and also telling us that CRT is not critical race theory. It's I forget exactly what the acronym she used for it is. It's in the video, but we were simply mistaken. We just didn't understand that it's a different CRT, not the CRT that we've all thought it was. So apparently that's supposed to make us feel better, yet you can't get any questions answered on the topic. So be alert, be aware, and be ready to fight because they are not going down without a fight themselves. They are going to run roughshod over us in the community if we don't agree with them. And I think it's garbage, especially coming from a government entity. But I guess that's just what we do in New York State. The government entities just run roughshod over people, and you either have to find a way to insulate yourself from it or book. So if you're thinking about booking, just so you know, I am a real estate agent, and I'd be happy to get you the hell out of here. There's a lot of places that are quite favorable to people and the residents that live within it. So that's my message for the week. We'll see you guys soon. Be well.
Good evening, everyone. We wanted to start this evening by sharing some information with you relative to New York State's culturally responsive sustaining education framework. And we'll begin with some clarification. So we realize the term critical race theory and culturally responsive teaching have been interchanged because of their acronyms. So in addition to providing some clarification, we want to share definitions with you. Critical race theory is an academic concept studied in legal scholarship by those in postgraduate and graduate academia. Critical race theory analyzes how racism is embedded in legal systems and policies. Whereas when we're talking about culturally responsive teaching, this is an approach that emphasizes and uses the cultural knowledge, prior experiences, frames of reference, and performance styles to make learning encounters more relevant and effective for all of our students. So I'd like to share clarification that the Penfield Central School District is not teaching critical race theory. Our curriculum is based on the New York State standards. However, we are focused on strengthening equity and inclusive practices to ensure that all of our students have a safe environment and feel a sense of belonging and connectedness to our schools. So I want to give you a little background and context about the culturally responsive sustaining education framework. In January 2018, the New York State Board of Regents directed the Office of Pre-Kindergarten through 12th grade education and higher education to convene a panel of experts and engage all stakeholders to develop from the ground up a framework for culturally responsive sustaining education. So the culturally responsive sustaining education is grounded in a cultural view of learning and human development in which multiple expressions of diversity, so this encompasses all of our social identities, such as race, ethnicity, social class, gender, language, sexual orientation, nationality, religion, and ability and disability. We want to ensure that all of these social identities are recognized and regarded as assets for our teaching and our learning. So the New York State Department of Education has shared with us this framework, and they've also provided us with briefs very recently. In the briefs, as well as the framework, they ask and answer these questions. So what is culture? Culture is a meeting point for schools to acknowledge and celebrate cultures. Culture welcomes multiple facets of identity, along with the unique experiences and perspectives. What is culturally responsive, sustaining education? Culturally responsive, sustaining education asks that we know our students, that we develop positive and meaningful relationships with our students, that we view cultural differences as an asset for teaching and learning and not view these as deficits. Culturally responsive, sustaining education asks that we understand that differences should be seen as strengths and maintained because it helps us notice the unique characteristics of our students and our families. What is the culturally responsive sustaining framework? Well, this provides guidelines for stakeholders in public education to understand and implement a framework that incorporates an equity and inclusive lens, recognizes the effect of the school environment on our students' performances, and how this environment helps them to be successful, promotes relationships of trust, provides opportunities for continual professional learning in equity, multicultural, and culturally responsive and sustaining pedagogies. It asks us to engage in critical conversations that will allow our students to think critically. And so now, Dr. Maloney.
Why should schools focus on cultures of their students? Culture, as we've mentioned, includes the multiple components of our identities, including our nationality, race, gender, language, sexual orientation, religion, economic background, and ability. Since we all bring our own uniqueness, schools are meeting points for cultures. All students deserve to feel safe and celebrated while at school. Yesterday, while meeting with a parent, the parent asked, hasn't the school been doing this? And what a great question. And we have, but we can do better. Celebrating, acknowledging, and learning about culture extends beyond traditional practices of experiencing specific cuisine, art, or music to also include ways of thinking, values, and forms of expression. As a school, we need to be more inclusive in the cultures we celebrate, acknowledge, and provide instruction on. Students need to not only experience and learn about cultures other than their own, students also need to experience their culture within the taught curriculum. How does implementing the culturally responsive sustaining framework improve your school community as a whole? When all cultures matter, our students' cultures can be positioned as strengths and as the foundation of empowering, rigorous, and innovative learning. Students are most successful when they feel safe, valued, and connected to school.
So we want to share with you these 4 principles of the culturally responsive sustaining framework. Welcoming and affirming. A welcoming and affirming environment allows our students to feel safe. It allows them to feel represented and reflected. This is a place where we want to embrace all of our students' cultural identities. When we think about high expectations and rigorous instruction, this is where we want to challenge our students. We want to give them opportunities to risk and grow academically, socially, and emotionally. We want our students to have those intellectual challenges.
Inclusive curriculum and assessment, which is representative of all students. It elevates historically marginalized voices. They include opportunities to learn about power and privilege in the context of various communities and empower students to be agents of positive social change. Inclusive curriculum and assessment provide the opportunity to learn beyond one's own scope and work toward dismantling systems of biases and inequalities. What does this look like in the classroom? Incorporating current events into instruction, including student voice in the curriculum design work. Resources to support the curriculum, which are written and developed by racially, culturally, and linguistically diverse perspectives. Instructional strategies which adapt to diverse learning styles. Ongoing professional learning. This is critical for the adults who support our students. It is important our faculty and staff have the tools in their toolboxes for this work. What does this training look like? Diversity, equity, and inclusion training. Support, aligning curriculum and instruction to the histories, language, and experiences of traditionally marginalized voices. Developing critically responsive, sustaining lessons on the K-12 continuum. How do we approach developing such lessons in curriculum? For years, our curriculum in Penfield has been rooted in the New York State standards, and it still will be. As you see from the graphic, when designing lessons and curricula, teachers will lean on the New York State learning standards, the New York State framework for social studies. That provides what content to teach, the key ideas and conceptual understandings. The social justice standards provide anchor standards in 4 domains: identity, diversity, justice, and action. These standards represent a continuum of engagement in anti-bias, multicultural, and social justice education. The social emotional learning framework with its 5 competencies: self-awareness, self-management, social awareness, relationship skills, and responsible decision-making. And the culturally responsive sustaining framework, which, as we mentioned, provides the equity and inclusion lens.
So now, as a result of sharing with you just the background in unpacking the culturally responsive sustaining education framework, we also want to share with you that we are in the process of developing, during the course of this year, we've actually had our first meeting with a diversity, equity, and inclusion core team. So this core team will be meeting monthly. The goal is for us to work together to establish a culturally responsive approach that ensures equitable outcomes and access for all of our students. We have invited as stakeholders students, families, district office staff, building representatives, as well as Board of Education members. So the function of this group is to serve as an advisory and a steering committee to develop and ensure that we have equitable systems, structures, policies, and procedures so that we can promote diversity, equity, and inclusion. We also are looking to develop subcommittees. So these subcommittees will be all facilitated by district office, building leaders, staff from our district. So for curriculum and instruction, we will have Dr. Leslie Maloney. Professional development, we will have Ms. Sheena Conway. Family and community engagement, that will be work that I will support. Our workforce development, Dr. Kenny will lead this subcommittee. Welcoming and affirming environments, this is also an area that we will all share. And diverse schools and learning opportunities, this will be led by our Director of Special Education, Mr. Scott Dreschler. So the goal here, again, is to invite the same stakeholders. We would want to have our Board of Education represented here. We want to have families and students to be a part of this very important work. This will also serve as an advisory. This will be an opportunity for folks to come together. We will study together the latest research, articles. We will review information both in our district, across the state, across the region, and nationally to identify the most important possible solutions to help us in our efforts of addressing any inequities that we may have within our district. Dr. Putnam mentioned earlier this evening that we want to bring our families together. We want to host community conversations and listening campaigns. So you see dates here. These dates represent our community conversations. It will be an opportunity for us to share our district priorities. We will define terminology so that there's clarity across the district around terms that we're using. We want to provide opportunities where we can learn and grow together as a community. As far as our listening campaign, the goal here is to listen to the voices of our community. We will invite our families and community members to share information and to ask questions. we will be developing a structure that will allow us to provide responses so that there'll be an ongoing opportunity for that two-way communication. And then last but not least, we wanted to share the idea of regular progress updates. So as we are doing things in district, we will be communicating these things with our families, with our community. We will be sharing regular updates. And this is, of course, including updates relative to our curriculum, but also our workforce diversity, our professional development, and how we plan to create and sustain our welcoming and affirming environments. And one of the things that I'd just like to highlight here is that diversity, equity, and inclusion is the overarching umbrella for all things that we will do in our district. And so it will be a thread that is woven throughout all of our departments and all of our work moving forward. Thank you.